Once white people begin to admit their race is the most violent and oppressive force of nature on earth, then we can talk. Those are the words which saw model Munroe Bergdorf sacked by L'Oreal. After the events in Charlottesville in the States, the makeup brand's first trans model took to Facebook to address what she sees as systemic racism in society. But L'Oreal, who just hired her, said what she posted was at odds with their policies of tolerance and diversity, and they dumped her. And Munroe Bergdorf is here. Hello, hello. This is what you wrote on Facebook. I'll just read the words so that our viewers, our audience, know.
Okay.
Honestly, I don't have the energy to talk about racial violence of white people anymore. Yes, all white people. Because most of you all don't even realise or refuse to acknowledge that your existence, privilege and success as a race is built on the backs, blood and death of people of colour.
Mm-hmm.
Your entire existence is drenched in racism.
Mm-hmm.
And do you mean all white people? Because that's what has wound some people up.
Basically, I'm speaking about socialisation. So I'm speaking about how society conditions us to believe certain things. So to a certain extent, we're socialised to believe that men are dominant, women are submissive. We live in a homophobic society that has only recently started to change. There's all of these things that aren't necessarily what we should believe, but they are in society.
But do you believe all white people...
I believe that there's a structure.
Sorry, I was just going to finish the sentence. Do you believe that all white people have taken part in racial violence, which is what you wrote?
I believe that society is built on the foundation. It's not what I believe, it's a fact, that society is built on the foundations of colonialism and slavery.
I understand that. In terms of specifically what you wrote,
yeah.
Are you standing by all white people and racial violence?
I'm
all white
standing
people
by,
are guilty of
racial violence. That's a very nuanced thing. So you have things like microaggressions that people of colour will experience every single day, that everything from moving from a black person on a bus to...
I understand that, but are you saying all white people are guilty of that?
I'm not saying all white people are guilty of it, but all white people benefit from racism with white privilege. If you are not actually dismantling racism, if you are not going to pull people up from the bottom of the pyramid to the top, then you are participating and benefiting from racism.
But you didn't write that. What you wrote was...
I did write that, but it was taken out of context.
These are the sentences that you wrote. I don't have the energy to talk about racial violence of white people anymore. Yes, all white people.
Yes.
That's in context.
The text,
would you agree?
No, I wouldn't agree, because the text originally had two bookends. This screenshot was sent to the Daily Mail by somebody that I know, and it was in response to Charlottesville. I wasn't just ranting randomly about white people. It was in response to this white supremacist rally.
Could you have worded it better?
To be honest, speaking about racism as a person of colour, it is a very passionate thing and it's a very emotional thing, and I'm not going to censor myself for my feelings. So, and these are my feelings.
No one would want you to censor yourself. It's the specificity, it's the accuracy.
I think this is the problem, is that white people are thinking about how it makes them feel when racism doesn't affect them. It affects people of colour. The system is not put in place to affect white people, and white people need to get over the fact that, yes, it's a really uncomfortable truth. It's a really inconvenient truth. Get over that get over that discomfort. Think about how it makes us feel.
If a white person made a sweeping generalisation about a black person, people would be cross.
That's a really interesting thing, because white people, celebrities like Lorde, said exactly the same thing that I said, and no one came after her.
But I'm asking you, are there double standards? If a white person made a sweeping generalisation about all
because there is a system in place
people.
to oppress black people. There's not a system in place to oppress white people. That doesn't exist.
Right, but that white person would be criticised.
They'd be criticised, but it would be an individual incident. There's not a system in place to affect white people's chances of gaining credit, gaining housing, gaining equal pay. There's all of these things that are in place to affect people of colour from being equal. We do not live in an equal society.
If people accept your premise that all white people benefit from racism effectively, what should all those white people do?
Start listening, which is the problem that I've come across, and I've done some other interviews as well, and it's just constantly over and over, well, I don't have privilege, and people need to stop thinking about it on an individual basis. We're talking about everyone here. And just because you don't feel privileged does not mean that if you were a black person or a South Asian person, exactly the same as who you are now, you would have less chances of getting out of the situation that you don't feel privileged in.
So what should those white people do?
White people should listen to people of colour and listen to our experiences and ask how we can help. You know, when something happens, check in with people. You know, when you're seeing all of these like people in America being killed by police or black trans women being murdered all the time, just check in with people and see what you can do. Donate time to charities. There's 1,000 things that you could be doing.
I mean, you may back me away when I talk about this individual, because they're an individual. Heather Heyer, obviously the white woman killed in Charlottesville. Yes. Are you saying that she benefited from this?
Absolutely not, because she was doing something. She gave her life. And this is the racial violence I'm talking about. Sure. When people actively try to combat racism, it brings out violence. And you've seen it from the response that I've had on the internet. You cannot bring up racism without causing a ruckus, because it brings out violence. I've had people saying, "How dare you call me a racist, you black bitch?" How does that work?
You've also had death threats.
I've had death threats, rape threats, people threatening to find me and beat me up. I've had people calling my phone and breathing heavily. I've had numerous emails just like saying, urging me to kill myself. And to be honest, it's getting worse and worse all the time, but there's no way that I can do anything about it. And I shouldn't have to deal with that for just basically speaking about basic racial theory and feminism.
Are you going to go to the police?
Well, I don't think that there's really anything that I can do.
Well, you can go to the police and report. If someone is threatening to kill you,
if
you can go to the police.
If you saw the sheer amounts, it's been every 5 seconds. Every 5 seconds. This has been world news. And it's not something that should be world news, and I shouldn't be sacked for calling out racism when I was in a campaign that was meant to be championing diversity. And especially when I was speaking about the violence of white people, but then they've got Cheryl Cole on the campaign, and she was convicted for actively punching a black woman in the face. And I don't understand how I'm not in line with their values, but they will hire Cheryl Cole over and over again and give her more and more chances, but she was convicted for punching a black woman in the face.
Does she not deserve a second chance?
I think if you're going to put a woman that punched a black woman in the face as the face of diversity, that just says a lot about white privilege, which proves my point.
John says she is correct. We do not live in an equal society, but we never have, and we never will. Chloe says, see how this news reporter, that's me, is trying to twist what Munroe is saying. We can't sit here and act like she's not telling the truth.
It's a really inconvenient truth, and God knows I wish that racism didn't exist, but...
Teapot says, I'm with at Munroe Bergdorf. White people, all of us, at best allow racism to continue, conscious or not, is not okay. And Kezia says, I'm so glad we're starting to talk about this. Munroe Bergdorf is 100% right.
I know that there's other people that are saying other stuff, but I'm not the first person to say it. And I think maybe this is a blessing in disguise if we can actually start having a conversation. I'm not going to shut up, and I'm not going to give in to people threatening me with things and saying that they're going to do things, because it just proves my point. It just proves exactly what I'm saying to be true. You can't say that. You can't have a go at me for saying the violence of all white people, but the only people that are insulting me and coming on my page and trolling me are all white people. It's not any people of colour. It's not.
How do you know they're all white?
From the pictures.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on the programme, Munroe Bergdorf.
Thanks.
Right, let's get